Hello, and welcome to the inaugural video of the revamped Film Love page. I had one of these a couple years back, but then I got a job writing about movies, and after publishing 1,000 or so, articles, I'm back and ready to give this another go. And what's the best way to start? With the end of Freddy Krueger. Now, Freddy did come back in New Nightmare, Freddy vs. Jason, and the atrocious 2010 remake, but this was the one where they really put him to bed for good, at least for a while, because capitalism comes calling. And anyway, New Nightmare's Freddy isn't really Freddy as much as he's the entity. It was Freddy vs. Jason that rescued him, and Jason, as it turns out, from hell. They kind of gloss over why Freddy would use his own power to bring Jason out of hell instead of himself, but hey, we here at Film Love aren't here to judge loopy cinema logic. As long as it doesn't drag down the movie viewing experience too much, and unfortunately, in the case of Freddy's Dead, that's exactly what drags it down. So Freddy's Dead came out in September 1991, and it made almost 35 million domestic against just 11 million. That's enough to make it a success, and it definitely was compared to the fifth movie, The Dream Child, which underperformed greatly, especially compared to just how big the fourth one was. Like it was a summer blockbuster, essentially, especially for the slasher world. Now, Freddy's Dead Hall was pretty good, but it's telling that it didn't open against much big competition, with Terminator 2 being in its 11th weekend, Robin Hood Prince of Thieves being in its 14th weekend, and Child's Play 3 being in its third weekend. And that underperformed even more than Freddy's Dead could be accused of having underperformed. But that financial haul was still enough to reaffirm the notion that the franchise was past its peak. Now, this one came from Rachel Talalay, whose most notable other movie as director was the box office bomb but eventual cult hit Tank Girl, which had Naomi Watts in it. Now, that's a wacky one, to say the least, and so is this. Talalay had a ton of experience with this particular franchise. It was effectively her big break. She worked with New Line as a line producer on the third film, a producer on the fourth, assistant production manager on the first one, and production manager on the second. She was also a production assistant on the excellent, creepy psychological thriller slasher Alone in the Dark in 1982, 2 years before the original Nightmare. And she also served as the apprentice editor and script supervisor on the underrated The House on Sorority Row. On top of directing Freddy's Dead, she came up with the story alongside screenwriter Michael DeLuca. And while the film doesn't work more often than it does, it's hard to argue with the fact that she made a decent looking film given the constraints of the time period and the relatively slim $11 million budget. It's also not hard to see that she really did value the franchise. It's mostly just an issue of the big changes to it not sticking the landing, and the franchise continuing to veer into comedic territory more than ever before. In fact, it also seems very content on imitating Twin Peaks. Now, that show ran for 2 seasons on ABC from April 1990 to June 1991, and it was critically acclaimed to the max at the time, but it was canceled because of lower viewership. It was a niche product. Now, imagine just how lucky this movie is in terms of its continued relevance of its jokes and homages. Had Twin Peaks just been an early 90s novelty that went away, uh, none of it would make sense. It already doesn't make a ton of sense, but what this film references would not make any sense. So it got pretty lucky. I assume Rachel Talalay knew at the time that Twin Peaks was going to hang on because it just genuinely was that great, but it got lucky.
We're in Twin Peaks here.
Definitely.
Have we seen enough?
Yeah.
Good.
Prior to this, the franchise had been delving into comedic territory, primarily with Freddy's one liners starting in the third movie. He was more just sinister and sadistic in the first one, and that mostly carried through to the second film. Even the whole "you've got the body, but I've got the brains" thing from that second movie, is more based in being sinister than the Schwarzenegger-esque one-liner droppings that started from the third film and moved on to this point. But here we're in full Army of Darkness territory, full on goofy, like how Freddy pushes out a big bed of nails for John Doe to land on. But what really sinks it are kill scenes like that don't attempt to be scary. We still have Freddy targeting individuals based on their own quirks and personalities, which is what set this franchise on a higher rung of the quality ladder than the Halloween or Friday 13th sequels. But gone is that grim humor, instead replaced by a Freddy from Looney Tunes. Granted, Carlos's death works, even though seeing Freddy hop behind him makes it impossible to be scared. You get some nice practical effects. You get a bit of backstory regarding the form his abuse took at the hands of his mother. But the death of Spencer, played by Breckin Meyer, who was in the actually scary Garfield, that's just a bridge too far. For one, we see him bouncing around the house. Again, Looney Tunes. But even worse is the Nintendo Power Glove reference. Never make a reference to tech, much less make it a part of one of your movie's bigger set pieces, as it were, unless you're sure that tech is going to stick around. And that tech sure did not. It tossed in some stereotypically trippy visuals from Hollywood and Iron Butterflies and Nagata Devita, a great song. And it's just too much. It's just too much for a kill scene.
Get out of here now, Tracy! Now!
Hey, you forgot the power glove!
Every genre movie creates its own logic, and so too does this one, but it's hard to wrap our heads around its version of Springwood. Are the protagonists seeing the same Springwood that Nancy lived in? Is it a dreamy version of it? Because all of the adults seem to just wander around, hoping that no kids will show up, except Roseanne, who flips out when she sees a kid. They come across as parts of a Freddy dream world, but we're supposed to consider them part of our reality. There are other logic leaps that take you out of the movie, like how Yaphet Kotto's doc remembers Carlos, John Doe, and Spencer even though everyone else doesn't. It's because we got one line of dialogue earlier in the movie about him controlling his dreams, which he then reconfirms towards the third act. Does that mean that everyone else has forgotten them? Because Freddy has cast a blanket of dreaminess upon them all? Is it like a Doctor Strange spell at the end of Spider Man No Way Home? Your guess is as good as mine.
So long, kid.
Now, on to the third act. This is where the movie actually takes off a little bit. That said, I don't recommend wearing the 3D glasses when watching your copy of the 4K. As excellent a job as they did on that set, the antiquated 3D sure does leave you with a headache. One almost wishes that they had made the whole thing a Freddy backstory, but I fully admit that likely would not have worked. But it definitely would have been more serious. As for why they didn't, it probably comes down to the fact the surprisingly solid pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares more or less already did it. Again, the third act is the movie's peak, but it's not without its silly moments. He says, I forgot how much it hurts to be human, but it's not as if this was his first time being brought out of the dream world into our world in these movies. The first and fourth one did that, and he had the stuffing beaten out of him in both. Nancy even set his in our world body on fire in the first one. And the way he gets taken out, killed in this movie is also kind of on the lame side. He's stuck with his own razor glove and then gets a stick of dynamite in him, which goes kablooey. The glove is a nice bit of full circle using, the killer's own tool against them. And it's all certainly final enough. I can't fault the movie too much for it, but it is kind of lame. And, you can't blame it for going a kind of lame route when it's a franchise that never figured out how to take its, antagonist, put him down for the count. It altered with each passing installment. So, overall, not great. It must have been disappointing for theater goers back in the early 90s, and not just because of the 3D headaches. But we do get two very funny moments. Though, as a slight against this comedic movie, they're not moments we're actually supposed to laugh at. Both are in the third act. The first is when Maggie, the protagonist, exits the dream world, and everything is still in 3D for those watching it in that format. She holds her hand out and says, "I'm still seeing things the way I saw them in my dream."
Because I'm still seeing things the way I did in my dream. It's not over.
And then the second is when she's fighting with Freddy, her dad. He grabs her by the throat and she just hurls the pipe right across the room. It's her one weapon and it just goes flying. It's good stuff.
Don't need one now.
So, what'd you think of my review? Do you agree with it? Do you get guilty pleasure vibes out of Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare? Please like, share, and subscribe to Film Love for more. I'm Ben Hathaway, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.